The first time Sofia Bellini met him, blood was on her hands and the rain was cutting the night into sharp silver lines. The ambulance doors burst open outside the small hospital near Lake Como, and the stretcher rolled in fast, too fast, carrying a man who looked foreign in a way that went beyond his pale skin and unfamiliar accent. He was unconscious, soaked to the bone, with a gash above his eyebrow and a heartbeat that stuttered like he was unsure whether to stay. Sofia didn't know his name yet, but something in her chest tightened as if it already mattered. Sofia was known in the hospital as La Dottoressa Calma, the calm doctor. In emergencies, when nurses panicked and families cried, she became steady, almost unshakable. That night, she slipped into her role automatically. Orders came out of her mouth clear and precise: scan, sutures, monitor the heart. Yet as she leaned over him, she noticed small details she couldn't explain away as professional instinct. The faint scar on his left hand, old and healed. The way his jaw clenched even in unconsciousness, as if he was used to holding himself together through pain. When he woke hours later, dawn was just beginning to soften the windows. His eyes opened slowly, gray-blue and confused, and the first word he tried to say came out broken. Sofia leaned closer, gently, introducing herself. He struggled, then managed a weak smile. "James," he said. "James Walker. I think I got lost." Lost. The word lingered between them. James explained in fragments that he was British, traveling alone through Italy after a long chapter of his life had ended. His car had skidded on the wet road. He remembered the sound of metal, then nothing. Sofia listened, nodding, her voice warm but professional. Still, when she left the room, she realized she was thinking about him more than she should. James stayed in the hospital for 3 days. Nothing life-threatening, Sofia assured him, but enough to keep him under observation. During rounds, she found herself lingering by his bed, asking questions that went just beyond symptoms. He told her he was an architect, or at least he used to be. A year ago, his life in London had collapsed quietly but completely. A marriage that ended not with shouting, but with silence. A job that lost its meaning. Italy, he said, was supposed to be a place to breathe again. Sofia understood more than she let on. She had built her life on responsibility after losing her mother young, choosing medicine because saving others felt like a way to make sense of loss. Love had always come second, and then third, until it slowly disappeared from her list altogether. She was respected, admired, and deeply alone. Listening to James speak, she felt a mirror being held up to parts of herself she had carefully ignored. On his last day, as Sofia signed his discharge papers, an awkward pause settled between them. James cleared his throat. "I don't know anyone here," he said lightly, but his eyes were serious. "Would you maybe tell me where a good coffee place is?" Sofia smiled, surprised by the flutter in her chest. She wrote down a small cafe near the water. As he stood, a little unsteady, he hesitated. "Thank you," he added, "not just for the stitches." She watched him walk away, telling herself that this was the end of it. Doctors did not follow patients into their lives, but fate, it seemed, had other plans. They met again 2 weeks later by accident. Sofia had finished a long shift and was walking along the lake, her mind heavy with a case she couldn't save. She spotted James sitting on a bench, sketchbook in hand, staring at the mountains like he was trying to memorize them. He looked healthier, calmer. When he saw her, his face lit up with genuine surprise, and for the first time in days, Sofia felt herself breathe freely. They talked. First about simple things. The lake, the food, the differences between Italy and England. Then, slowly, about deeper wounds. James admitted he felt like a failure, starting over in his 40s with no clear direction. Sofia confessed that sometimes she felt like her life was already decided for her, a straight line with no room for detours. There was no dramatic confession, no sudden promise, just two people sitting side by side, feeling less alone than they had in years. What followed was not a fairy tale rush, but something quieter and more fragile. Coffee turned into walks. Walks turned into shared dinners. Yet challenges rose quickly. Sofia's schedule was unforgiving. Emergencies didn't care about plans. James struggled with being a stranger in a country where he barely spoke the language. There were misunderstandings, missed messages, moments where both wondered if this connection was too complicated to survive. The hardest moment came when James received an offer from London. A prestigious firm wanted him back. It was everything he thought he had lost. When he told Sofia, her smile was real, but her eyes betrayed her. She encouraged him, logically, kindly, like the doctor she had always been. But inside, she felt the old lesson returning. Don't hold on, because everything leaves. They argued for the first time the night before his departure. Not loudly, but painfully. James accused her of hiding behind her work. Sofia accused him of running away when things became real. Words hung heavy, and when he left, neither knew if goodbye meant goodbye forever. Weeks passed. Sofia buried herself in the hospital. James returned to London, but found that the city felt smaller now, suffocating. The job didn't heal what was broken. Late one night, after a particularly difficult surgery, Sofia sat alone in the empty break room and realized something terrifying and freeing. For the first time, she didn't want to be strong. She wanted to be honest. She wrote to James, not as a doctor, not as a careful woman, but as herself. She told him she was afraid, that she had spent her life saving others to avoid facing her own heart. That meeting him had reminded her she was still capable of choosing, not just enduring. James read the message twice, then booked a flight. When he returned to Lake Como, it was autumn. Leaves floated on the water like quiet confessions. He waited outside the hospital, unsure if he was too late. When Sofia stepped out and saw him, the world seemed to pause. This time, there were no accusations, only truth. James admitted he didn't want success without meaning. Sofia admitted she didn't want safety without love. Their decision wasn't perfect or easy. James didn't stay forever without question. Sofia didn't abandon her career. They chose something braver, to build a life that allowed both roots and wings. He took on projects between London and Italy. She learned to step back when she could. They learned each other's languages, slowly, imperfectly, laughing at mistakes. Years later, Sofia would sometimes think back to that rainy night and the man on the stretcher with a broken heartbeat. She understood now that not all healing happens in hospitals. Some of it happens when two lost people meet by chance and choose again and again not to walk away. The story of the lady doctor and the British stranger wasn't about destiny written in the stars. It was about courage. About listening when life interrupts your plans. About understanding that love doesn't arrive when you are ready, but when you are willing. And in that willingness, both Sofia and James found something more powerful than certainty. Hope. Autumn settled gently over Lake Como, painting the mornings in soft gold and cool blue. For Sofia, life returned to its familiar rhythm of early rounds, urgent calls, and late-night silence. Yet something had shifted inside her. Even on the busiest days, her thoughts wandered to James, to the way his voice softened when he spoke about starting over, to the calm she felt when he simply listened. What unsettled her most was not his absence, but how present he still felt in her life. James stayed in a small rented apartment overlooking the lake, filling his days with sketches and walks. He tried to convince himself that this pause was temporary, that he was only resting before returning to London. But every time he imagined leaving, his chest tightened. Italy had given him space to breathe. Yes, but Sofia had given that space meaning. Still, he struggled with the fear of becoming dependent on a feeling he didn't fully understand. They continued to meet, cautiously at first, coffee after Sofia's shifts, short walks squeezed between her responsibilities. There were moments of laughter that surprised them both, followed by silences heavy with unspoken questions. Neither wanted to rush into promises they might not keep. Both carried the weight of past disappointments, whispering warnings into their ears. One evening, Sofia invited James to dinner at her apartment. It was a small place, tidy and quiet, reflecting a life designed around efficiency rather than comfort. As she cooked, James noticed the photographs on the wall, her parents on their wedding day, Sofia caught him looking and explained softly how her mother's illness had shaped her, how hospitals had become both a refuge and a prison. Her mother smiling, vibrant, and alive. James listened without interrupting, realizing that her strength had been forged by loss, not ease. The closeness of that night scared them both. When James reached for Sofia's hand, she froze, not pulling away, but not moving forward either. He withdrew immediately, apologizing, his face clouded with self-doubt. The distance between them suddenly felt larger than the room. Sofia hated herself for it, but fear spoke louder than desire. Days passed awkwardly. Messages became shorter, meetings less frequent. Sofia told herself this was for the best. James told himself the same. Yet neither believed it. The breaking point came unexpectedly. She stood alone in the corridor, her professional composure finally cracking. A young patient died under Sofia's care after a long, exhausting battle. Without thinking, she called James. He arrived without questions, finding her sitting on the steps outside the hospital, eyes red, shoulders shaking. She didn't explain much. She didn't need to. James sat beside her, silent, steady. In that moment, Sofia understood something she had spent years avoiding. Strength didn't mean carrying everything alone. It meant allowing someone to stay when things fell apart. She turned to him, voice trembling, and admitted she was terrified of loving someone she might lose. James answered honestly, confessing he was afraid of staying in a place where he didn't belong. Their fears didn't cancel each other out, but they made room for understanding. That night, they didn't make grand declarations. Instead, they made a quiet agreement to be present, to stop borrowing trouble from the future. They chose honesty over protection, vulnerability over control. As winter approached, Sofia and James found a fragile balance. Not perfect, not easy, but real. They learned that love wasn't a sudden rescue or a dramatic cure. It was a series of small choices made on ordinary days. And for the first time in a long while, both of them felt that whatever came next, they wouldn't have to face it alone. Winter arrived early that year, wrapping Lake Como in a quiet stillness. The crowds vanished, the cafes closed sooner, and the days grew shorter. For Sofia and James, the calm was deceptive. Beneath it, uncertainty was slowly taking shape. James received the email on a gray afternoon. The London firm wanted a final answer. A long-term contract. Stability. Recognition. Everything he had once chased. He read the message several times, his reflection staring back at him from the dark screen. This decision no longer belonged to him alone, yet he wasn't sure how to share its weight. Sofia sensed the change before he spoke. He grew quieter, distracted, his smiles arriving a second too late. When he finally told her, they sat across from each other at the same cafe where they had first talked freely. The lake lay calm between them, hiding its depth. Sofia listened carefully, her doctor's instinct urging her to stay composed, to analyze instead of feel. "This is important for you," she said at last. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled in her lap. "You shouldn't give it up." James searched her face, hoping to hear something else. "And what about us?" he asked. The question hung heavy. Sofia wanted to say she needed him to stay, but years of discipline and self-denial rose like a wall inside her. Love, she believed, was something you made space for after everything else was secure. She nodded slowly, offering encouragement when her heart begged for honesty. They agreed he would return to London for a few months. Not forever, they told each other, just to see. The promise felt fragile, like glass held too tightly. Distance changed everything. Calls were squeezed between Sofia's shifts and James's meetings. Time zones stole their spontaneity. When Sofia ended a long day in the operating room, James was already asleep. When he woke, she was heading back to work. Words became efficient. Emotions were postponed. Loneliness crept in quietly. Sofia watched couples walk hand in hand along the lake and wondered if she had made the right choice. At the hospital, she was praised for her dedication, yet she felt hollow. Saving lives did not fill the space James had occupied. In London, James felt the same disconnect. The office buzzed with ambition, but he moved through it like a visitor. His colleagues spoke of deadlines and promotions, while his thoughts drifted to quiet evenings in Italy, to Sofia's tired smile and the way she listened as if nothing else mattered. Their first real argument happened over the phone. A missed call, a forgotten message. Small things, but they carried the weight of months of restraint. Frustration spilled out, followed by silence. Days passed without contact, each believing the other had pulled away first. The breaking moment came when Sofia faced a personal crisis alone. Her father was hospitalized unexpectedly, and she spent nights sleeping in a chair by his bed. Exhausted and scared, she waited for James to call. He didn't know. She hadn't told him, afraid of adding to his pressure. When he finally learned the truth, his guilt was immediate and overwhelming. "I should have been there," he said, his voice thick with regret. "Yes," Sofia replied softly, not in accusation, but in truth. That word changed something. For the first time, they stopped protecting each other from reality. They spoke openly about their resentment, their fear, their exhaustion. It was painful, but also freeing. James made his decision that night. He realized that no achievement felt meaningful if it required him to be absent when he was needed most. Sofia, in turn, understood that love was not a distraction from her purpose, but a source of strength. Winter began to loosen its grip as James booked his flight back to Italy. When he arrived, the air felt lighter, though nothing was magically resolved. They embraced without words, knowing this choice would demand sacrifices from both sides. Chapter 3 was not about reunion as an ending, but as a beginning. A moment when distance taught them what closeness truly meant, and when both learned that some risks are worth taking, not because they are safe, but because they are honest.